Okay, everybody, you're being recorded. So welcome to our May meeting, our second meeting here at the Bowen. We have a good presentation tonight. We have John Seibel here. We're going to talk about a little bit of club business. We've got some events coming up. And then we've got our photo challenge, which is tells a story. And then, well, when we get to it, we're making a couple changes to the photo challenge later this year. But we've got a big program, so we're going to go ahead and get started before something stops working. Here, this way. Right at the bottom button. I like stick better than it likes me. All right, we're back. We're back. We are back.
Apparently, I know how to use this.
Yeah. You want to take over?
Sure, I can do that.
All right, so as usual, we'd like to talk about, we're always taking new members. If you're not a paid member, you get extra benefits. You can see that on the screen. If you're interested in becoming a paid member, go to northgeorgiaphotographyclub.com and you can see the details. Back in April 30th, we participated in the North Georgia Camera Club Council Shootout. We've been talking about that for a couple months. Our team finished in 6th place, and we had 4 members who won ribbons. Steve Blizzard finished in 10th place for the young category. Dick finished in 8th place for landscape. Peter Ciro finished in 4th place for diagonal. And Ken Wilkins, we had a 1st place winner. He finished 1st place in the cemeteries category. So there were 5 categories. We placed in 4 of the 5 categories. I think everybody who went had a good time, and we're already looking forward to next year's, which we don't know when it's going to be or where it's going to be. But
And if you're interested, the 5th category was lines and angles.
so, and if you go to the North Georgia, I think it's ng3c.com or ng3c.org, you can see the winning pictures. They have all 50 pictures, 10 in each category posted.
Ready?
All right. So, got some stuff coming up here at the Bowen and some stuff going on at the Bowen. There is a photography competition here. The theme is Not All Those Who Wander Are Lost. You got 3 cash prizes for 1st, 2nd, and 3rd place. The deadline to enter is June 14th. The entry fee is $10 per piece. You can enter up to 5 photographs. The exhibit is going to be from July 16th to August 26th. That's the link to if you want to go ahead and submit images, bowenarts.org. And Dick actually put that link on the Facebook page yesterday.
And I put the forms are uploaded as files on both Facebook pages.
And we have a North Georgia Photography Club member who currently has an exhibit here. Jack Anthony is exhibiting 50 black and white photos in the main room here at the Bowen. So everybody who is here tonight has to make sure you go and look at them before you leave. Jack, I don't know if you wanted to say anything, or he gave me a thumbs up.
I should say there, thank you.
So, and if you're not here tonight, come down to the Bowen and take a look. And then another project we have going on, and Cindy told me about this, and she didn't know I was going to make her talk. The 1,000-word project. So do you want to take a minute and?
Well, I was just going to say, 2 years ago when we started it out, I participated in my niece who had Down syndrome, and it was the best thing it was the most rewarding thing I've ever done, to watch her decide what she wanted to photograph, and she had very definite ideas about what it was going to be, and she won a prize, and that was also pretty rewarding for her. So if you have spare time, it's just a great thing to do. There are young kids, there are adults, and I think they're working it a little differently than they used to, but they do have an exhibit at the end, and wonderful photographs.
And don't they put a book together? I was reading on the website.
Yeah, maybe they do now.
So that is the website. So if you're at home, copy that down. And if you have any questions, you can contact Cindy. She is on Facebook. She doesn't go on very often, but you can send her a message or contact me, and I'll get you in touch with Cindy, and we'll go from there. Yeah, let's see if this works.
No.
Nope. Maybe I do need to change the battery.
No.
All right. So a couple of events. The Simpson Farm event, the reason I put an asterisk there, that is not a club event. A lot of us have been there. We've done 2 club trips there. Mr. Simpson passed away last year. If you're not familiar with Simpson Farm, it's like Old Car City, except organized. And there's thousands of, not as many cars as Old Car City, but thousands of old rusted cars and fire engines on display. He passed away last year. They're going to be auctioning off his car collection. So they're opening up this weekend, Saturday and Sunday from 9 to 6 to the public and for photographers for free. So it's one last shot to take photos there. I think the weekend after Memorial Day is when the auction starts. You could bid for one of the vehicles too. So I might be there on Sunday. I know Peter Ciro said he was going to be coming, and maybe we'll see some of you there. Rick, I know, is online. You can tell us about our waterfall trip tomorrow.
Thanks, Mike. I think last time I checked, we have about 5 of us planning on going. So there's still some room if anybody else wants to pick it up. We're going to start at the Angel Falls Trailhead, and I've given map coordinates for that. It's easier to find the place that way. But Angel Falls Trailhead takes us to Panther Falls and Angel Falls, and we're going to meet there about 8 o'clock. And then after that, that's about a 0.6 mile hike each way. And after that, we're going to go right around the corner. Very nearby is Minnehaha, which is one of the prettiest waterfalls, I think, in all of Georgia. And that's only a 0.2 mile hike from where we park. And basically after that, we'll split up. So it's pretty much going to be a half-day deal.
And I think the weather seems like it's going to be nice. So
yeah, it's supposed to be a little warm, mid-60s first thing, and mid-70s later. So it'll be a little warm, but we shouldn't get bad storms or anything until afternoon.
All right. And then the other event we have coming up on June 4th, for that first week of June, is the Helen to Atlantic Balloon Race, which we go to every year. I'll let Dick talk about that just a little bit.
So the actual start of the race is on Thursday morning, weather permitting. The last 2 times I've been there, they couldn't launch that first morning because the wind was blowing the wrong way. But they will have the balloons there. They will inflate the balloons. They will raise them up 50 feet or so on tethers, so you can get all the same photographic opportunities whether they actually launch or not. And they do it again on Friday morning and again on Saturday morning. They also have balloons inflated and flying at 6:30 p.m. each evening, if you want to catch the nighttime show instead of one. And so the launch field is a big open field, pasture, I think, but anyway, big open field. And the crews all have their assigned spots on the field. You are free to wander around among the balloons as they're setting up and launching. So you can get whatever angles you want. You can walk up to the top of the balloon and slide outside, open up the flaps, stick the camera into the picture.
Is it the same place as last year?
Yep. It's been in the same place now for 5 or 6 years in a row. You go up to Helen, you turn like you're going to cool tubing, and you go across the left.
And I think it took money for parking, make sure you have cash.
They're
Yeah.
$5 a car.
Yeah, they started that last year, but
Now, you got to pay attention because they will make the decision every morning about what they're going to do at 6:45 in the morning. You won't know until then whether or not they're going to do anything. So you kind of got to take your chances. If you think they're going to launch, you go up there and you may be disappointed. Such is life.
then last year, a couple of us afterwards went to Anarubi Falls. That's basically right around the corner. First breakfast at Huddle House, and then we went to Anarubi Falls. So there's still a lot to do and a lot to photograph in Helen if you've never been there before, but that's always fun. So the club sponsored event is going to be on Saturday. And then we have some workshops coming up also. The Scott Gibson Portrait Photography, that is going to be on Sunday. That sold out in a matter of hours. Unfortunately, we only had 6 open spots, so that was first come, first served. And then we have Anna DeStefano was doing 2 workshops for us in June. One's going to be on Zoom, and then we're going to do a follow-up in person on June 25th. And Timmy, I saw you, so I'll let you talk real quick about that.
Okay, thanks, Mike. So yeah, I'm trying to find my information here. Yeah, she's calling it the intuitive photography. And she's going to talk about how she gets prepared for locations, how she uses her kind of intuition, as she calls it, to capture images. And then she's also going to talk about processing, and what she's wanting to do is do her Zoom meeting on June 16th from 7 to 9, and then using the information that we learn actually at the end of June there. Mike, is the June 20, did she tell you that for the June 25th?
That's the Saturday, that's the last Saturday of the month, so I just put it up there.
Okay,
That
so
date
I
is
don't,
not- it is
yeah,
not confirmed.
I don't know if that's the official date then or not. She just said the end of June. So I don't know exactly, but anyway, but I think we're going to do that I'm still working out details on the in-person, but I think we're doing that in Athens at the State Botanical Garden, but I'll get the latest details from her. But the June 16th on Zoom from 7 to 9, that one's already set in stone. And then we'll use what we learn at the in-person meetup.
So I will get that posted on the website, I mean, on the Facebook page, probably that first week of June. Remember that the workshops, that's a benefit for the paid members. These workshops are free, and that's one of the benefits of being a paid member. So we'll put that information online and send an email out to the email list as soon as everything is set up. And that's about all we've got right now with trips and workshops. Hopefully some more will be coming soon. But now we're going to let John do his presentation. I have a little introduction about John. John specializes in photographing sunsets, sunrises, nature, landmarks, architecture, and a variety of other sites that we often miss or overlook in the hurried pace of life or while we're asleep. In addition to creative use of light, he applies the 3 Ps to his photography: patience, placement, and perseverance. His philosophy is you can't get the shot that isn't there, and you can't get a shot if you're not there. Some of John's work can be occasionally seen during photographic exhibits here at the Bowen. He also does nearly all of his own printing on a variety of media, and he has developed a following in the North Georgia region of other artists for whom he does fine art printing. So we're going to present John Seibel and give us, hopefully I can share his presentation. So hang on. All right. So you share. Desktop. All right, there is John's presentation. All right, go back to Zoom and see if that works. All right. Okay. All right. All right. I haven't hit share yet. All right. Share John's screen. All right. And slideshow. Slideshow from beginning.
Here we are.
All right. And All right, we should be good. See? Now we'll see if we do this good when we get to Lisa's part of the presentation.
So it's good to see everybody tonight. I've spoken to the club a couple of times in the past, but it has been a long time, so it's good to be back. Thank you very much, Mike, for the kind introduction tonight. And I would be remiss if I didn't introduce my better half over here and partner in all that I do. And you'll hear my wife, and you will hear tonight how involved she is in some of the work that we've had the opportunity to do. I've given this presentation a couple of times, and I always wonder whether I'm really talking about putting wildlife photography, or if I'm really talking more about putting the life back into the wildlife photography. I think it's really kind of a combination of both. And I think you'll see that by the time that we get done with the presentation this evening. Kind of a quick overview is that this, unfortunately, is not really a very casual effort. It's something that requires you to really develop some skill and craft in what you're doing, and go out with some specific intent to capture what I consider to be some sort of special wildlife photography, and I'll talk a little bit about that here in a second. It really does require you to have good sound knowledge of the camera. I'm not going to talk too much about the specifics this evening. I'll answer any questions that you might have if I can. But there's so many resources out there for learning about your camera. And I'm always surprised whenever I can't figure something out and I want to get into more detail, how much useful information there is out there on the internet, and specifically in YouTube these days. I don't think there's anything in the world that you can't go out on YouTube and search and find a plethora of things to provide you with information. So those sorts of things will help a lot. Specifically as it relates to camera technology, there's a lot of things that camera does today that used to be very difficult for us as photographers to do, particularly when we were shooting film and those sorts of things. And the technology that's built into these cameras, if you know how to set your camera up to do that, can really help you advance your photography, regardless of what it is, but in my mind, specifically when you're dealing with such as wildlife photography. I will say that not all cameras are created equal. Some cameras and some lenses probably do a better job with wildlife photography, but I don't think that there's a camera system out there in use today, whether it's a DSLR or whether it's a mirrorless camera, Nikon, Canon, Sony, it really doesn't matter. These cameras have the capability to take some really amazing photos, and you can use these to optimize the way that you present some of your wildlife photography. Again, if that's something that you're interested in doing. To me, it's a bit like practicing medicine. It's one of those things where learning about the science or learning about the technology and how to work with your camera, knowing what it's thinking when you do certain settings, press the shutter button down, and then the other part of it is a little bit like art or a little bit like craft, which is something that you want to try to bring these two things together, and they both, like the technology is going to evolve over time, and certainly the craft of doing this type of photography is going to evolve over time as well. This is one of the hard things about, getting that very special wildlife photography. You're sometimes going to deal with once in a lifetime scenes that you're going to be presented with. Really important to get it right in the camera as best you can the first time around, because in a lot of those cases, there isn't going to be any do-overs. My big caveats tonight are I shoot with Canon equipment. That's what I know. That's what I understand. So those are the settings and the nuances of the technology that I'm aware of. I think whatever a Canon camera can do, a Nikon camera can do, a Sony camera can do, and so on and so forth. I love Canon lenses, but I use Sigma lenses that really help me reach out there. I've got a 150 to 600 that I put on a Canon body that gives me the equivalent of 960 millimeters of focal length, which is a lot of super telephoto when you're trying to get those close-up photos of something that's going to be a long distance away, which wildlife a lot of times is. The other caveat that I have is there isn't anything that I want to talk about tonight. There's anything that I'm going to say about the type of wildlife photography that I enjoy doing that denigrates beautiful photos like this, close-up photos, frame filling photos of birds in your backyard, ducks on a lake, whatever they might be. those are equally amazing and equally beautiful. But what I'm talking about tonight is, that little extra touch of allowing you to have some sort of a connection with the wildlife, and therefore the wildlife having that connection with the viewers that we're talking. A lot of the things I'm going to talk about tonight should sound familiar, regardless of what type of photography you've experienced with, what types of photography you like to do. I know you've got some portrait photography workshops and things coming up, so somebody will probably talk about that the eyes of this, or the window to the soul being eyes of whatever the subject is. It's the same way with your wildlife photography. Trying to make some sort of an intimate and special connection between you standing behind the camera in a lot of cases, but again, capturing that so you can present it on the internet, present it in print or whatever, and some viewer can really appreciate that very special connection that you've been able to make with wildlife, doing something unique and interesting and maybe unusual. Placement in frame, the composition, that's important regardless of what type of photography you're doing. Having some sort of a complementary background that helps isolate and set your subject off from the background in many cases. And then the other thing is the shooting angles. Some of my favorite photos that I've seen or that I've taken of some wildlife, particularly shorebirds and things of that nature, have been taken when you get down on your belly, you're laying something on the sand out there, and you can get that eye-to-eye connection with something that you're photographing. There's, I won't say that these are bad photos, but a lot of those when we're looking down on children, looking down on animals, and trying to do pet photography and things like that, when they look very diminutive when the viewer is up high, as opposed to in a lot of cases when the viewer can get down low. And again, make that very special connection with the subject. Really important before you go out, in my mind again, to establish the goals of what it is that you're trying to accomplish when you're out there. Are you trying to do frame filling, close-ups of something? Again, if it's doing something unusual and unique, they can be frame filling. You've got to have a really good handle on or knowledge of the behavior and habitat of the wildlife that you're going after. In a lot of cases, you may go out and get very lucky and find a variety of different types of wildlife in the area at one time that you can engage with, photograph. In many of the cases, when we've gone out looking for this type of photography, we often go out looking for a specific type of wildlife or animal at a specific time of year, doing specific types of things, and you'll see a number of those photographs in this presentation this evening. Whether you're trying to do environmental photo or portraits or landscape, environmental landscapes with wildlife in it, there's a few different things. I've got a sample I'll show you here in a second of what John Seibel's opinion is of those two different things. And the important part is that the decisions that you make about what it is that you're trying to capture when you're out there will dictate the type of gear that you've got to take, the time of year that you might go, the type of preparation that you've got to do, both mentally, physically, and then technology-wise with your camera. And that will really drive what you take with you, how much weight you may end up having to carry with you, which would be a big thing. I can tell you from personal experience. And then in some cases, you might find that the gear that you have drives what you're able to capture, and therefore what you might modify your goals to be, as opposed to having to be very broad and somewhat elusive, if you will. If any of you are members of Kelby One and have access to that, there's a really great presentation out there by a world famous wildlife photographer by the name of Bruce Peterson, who's done some of the most amazing stuff I've ever seen. He's more of a generalist than some of those people who do specific bird photography, but his stuff is nonetheless amazing. He's got a biology background, so he knows a lot about the animals that he's going out there to be able to photograph, which has helped him a lot. The two things that he said in this presentation, which is about an hour and a half long and again, very worthwhile to see, is do your homework and become a wildlife protector. Again, it's the more you know, the more you're able to achieve some of these goals that you might have for your wildlife photography. So we got in my mind, environmental portraits and then environmental landscapes with wildlife in them. This might be more of a portrait where you got a picture of American bison. This happens to be in Custer State Park. Happens to be at a time of year where the conditions out there are very harsh. You can see that there's snow blowing, see that it's very cold and frigid out there. You can also see this bison is just kind of taking it all in because it's that is its environment and what it's used to living in. But you can see that picture was all about the bison itself, very little about the area around it. Whereas this photo was taken, I think, the same day, nearly the same place, with a different lens and an entirely different perspective where you can see more of the landscape, you can see the terrain, you can see the harsh conditions, you can see the near whiteout conditions, and you can also see that the American bison out there in this particular location travel in groups and things of that nature and stay together. So that was how I would differentiate those two things that may be your goals that you're going out to capture. Timing is so important in everything that we do in life. Time is very important just about any photograph that we take, as far as the press of the shutter button, the movement of the things in the scene. It certainly isn't any different here. Timing that I'm talking about in this particular case is more, when do you go to find the things that are unique about a particular species of wildlife, a particular place that you happen to have access to? In some cases, you may be looking that might be your backyard. In a lot of cases, it's going to be someplace that's probably much more distant than that. But it really is one of the most critical goals to help you achieve some of these lofty aspirations about doing wildlife photography. It's always going to be tied to your goals. In a lot of cases, these are some of the things that we might be trying to capture in a place at a different time of year. That would be some of your mating and courting displays, new births and babies, which is always a really fun time of year. Happens to usually occur with the things that we got experience with in the spring. So you've got courting, and you've got mating, and then you've got babies, and then you've got parenting and feeding and nurturing. And there's just nothing wrong with having a little bit of a key factor in the photograph or the photography that you're doing as well. In the fall, particularly with North American large mammals, you're going to have more of these territorial challenges and displays. You've got the rut, you've got bugling, you've got posturing, and this is more of the courting for the very large males, as opposed to what happens in springtime in most cases with a lot of your bird species that are out there. So here we've got what could be a really neat photograph, and I'm not happy with this one, but we got elk and Yellowstone in the spring, and big mammals in the spring really look kind of scruffy. And a lot of your birds look that way in spring too, when they molt and bring on new feathers, and then they look absolutely gorgeous. I can't imagine what this elk is going to look like in 5, 6, 7 months down the road. I've actually got a nice scene. I've got sort of a fun theme with the Creek in the background. We've got a little bit of fog out there. We actually have some nice morning light that I look at and say, wow, that just isn't exactly what I was hoping for. And this is far enough back that this is one of those times where I started learning and said, you know, you're just not going to see big, beautiful North American mammals in America with big antlers in the spring. Doesn't happen to me. So here we've got one that's in a similar location. This is in the Rocky Mountain National Park. This is a Rocky Mountain elk. We've got full antlers. We've got a more unique scene. It certainly has some nice color because we've got fall color. But you've got an elk that is preparing itself for this rut and bugling and the things that mammals typically do in the fall. And he's actually out there removing the rest of the velvet off of his antlers that they get as the antlers are developing over the spring and summer months. With birds, in most cases, they do all of their mating and courting and those sorts of things early in the year. A lot of that happens based on weather conditions. With all of those things, you've got to have a place to have to lay eggs, to have babies, to sit on the nest. So a lot of the nest building and some of those interesting activities are going to happen in the spring before the eggs are laid and the babies are born. This is one of those hoarding displays that you got with a great egret. It's a very unique look for them because you've got the green lower around the eyes, which only happens at a particular time of year. You've got the feathers that develop differently in springtime. And then the other thing you have is the unique body positions that they get themselves into to, guess what, they're looking to attract some females. And you see this in just about every species. We've got some other examples of that that will appear a little bit later on in this presentation. So once we get our nest building and we get our courting and all of the other things that are going to happen, guess what happens after that? You get chicks that are hatched, the babies that are born, and then you get parenting duties that take place. I'm glad my mother probably had a baby bottle that she took care of feeding with. I just don't think this method of being fed looks like a lot of fun, but believe it or not, that's how the majority of birds are fed by their mothers, is to ingest something and then exgest it, I guess. A lot of them, depending on what type of bird they are, the mothers are going to bring something back. It's going to be little pieces of fish or flesh or something like that that we're going to feed them with, and you can capture that type of activity typically as it's sitting on the nest. But this is how egrets do it, and I know most of the other birds that are of this type do it the same way. And then again, there's just the cute factor. So we happen to be down in Florida at Deer Lake in Lakeland, Florida, and there's black swans down there, and they're absolutely gorgeous and amazing. You saw a black swan a little bit earlier, and we were talking with a lady on the trail, and she said something about, well, there used to be some eggs down here someplace, but I didn't see the eggs today when I came by. That's because the eggs didn't last 24 or 48 hours and hatched in these absolutely adorable little black swan chicks that were down there by the lake, just right next to the edge of the trail. And of course, they were very cooperative, and I tried to do what I preached that we ought to do, which is get down to the lower level as opposed to shooting down on top of it. I think it creates a little bit different look for that. So one of the things that's beneficial about the rut, when elk are looking for mates and they're out there bugling, and I don't know if you can see it all that well, but this elk is up here. He's spent about 10 minutes probably on this hillside, just screaming at the top of his lungs. It's cold enough because it's Rocky Mountain National Park, and this fall going on, winter, and you can see this breath coming out. But one of the interesting things that just happened was we're in a park near Grand Lake, Colorado, and I think again this is actually in the Rocky Mountain National Park. And there's elk everywhere out in this field, and they're doing all sorts of things. Some of the big bulls are chasing females, and the other big bulls are chasing other bulls out of the way. And this guy comes walking up into this campground that we're in, or picnic area that we're in, and he walks up through and across the campground and up on the hill, and he just plants himself there. And of course, the only thing that's dumber probably than a bull elk in rut is to watch people with cameras try to get in the way to capture this elk and not realize that they could find themselves in a lot of trouble and a lot of pain if they're not a little bit more careful about where they're positioning themselves, and just let the elk go, do what it's going to do, and get the best shot that you possibly can. Talked a little bit about this already, but knowing how your equipment works, it helps if you establish your goals ahead of time and have some sort of idea of what the conditions are that you're going to encounter. If you're shooting big mammals, they don't move quite as fast as birds, particularly birds in flight. So you may be able to adjust your shutter speed a little bit. But one of the things that I found is particularly helpful is if you've got a camera that allows you to put some custom settings in, you can go in and dial in what your ISO might be, what your shutter speed might be, different things of that nature that helps the camera help you get great shots. And you can instantly, within a second or two, change your camera from being in landscape photography mode to wildlife photography mode very, very quickly. And then it's really important at that point to know how you change the other settings in the camera if they're not working for you, if they're too dark, if it's not fast enough. And it's always a good idea while you're out there taking these photos to look at the back of your camera. Use that LCD screen that's back there and use the zoom feature that you've got back there to be able to zoom in a lot of cases up to 10 power and see more of the detail of the important areas of that particular shot that you're trying to capture. Usually it's going to be around face detail. You're almost always, you're always going to want the eyes to be good and sharp. You're always going to be interested probably in some depth of field, but when you're doing wildlife photography with long lenses that have a limitation in what the widest aperture is going to be, you may not be able to achieve that. So the important thing is be willing to check, be willing to look at the pictures on the back of your camera, be critical of those pictures, and make adjustments as much as you can on the fly. Because I can tell you from personal experience, there is almost nothing worse than getting home with what you think is a grand collection of wonderful photos of something, and then go in there and find out something's wrong with all of them because they're a little bit soft or they're out of focus or something like that. My recommendation, I love circular polarizers for landscape photography. People use water, there's a lot of benefit doing that, but they also cut down on the amount of light that's coming through the lens. So that's probably not going to help you a lot with landscape or with wildlife photography. So I would abandon using some sort of a polarizing filter on wildlife lenses. It's always better to shoot a little too fast rather than a little too slow, because motion is going to show up in your photos probably before anything that can happen shooting too fast. Only problem you have when you're shooting maybe too fast is you don't get enough light through the lens and you don't have a good exposure. And again, that's one of the reasons to look at those images on the back of your screen so you can tell whether you're getting enough brightness or not. We're in a world today, and jumping ahead a little bit, I suppose, but we're in a world today where we've got a lot of exposure, latitude with the pictures. So being a little over or a little under may not be the worst thing in the world. Being a little soft and having your pictures be a little bit blurry. I don't care what to say about being able to go to Photoshop, sharpen your pictures and things like that. That may help find edge detail and make some pictures look better, but I've never had any success myself with making a blurry image look good and sharp. The other thing when we're talking about settings in your camera and ISO, I'll touch on that in a second, but a higher ISO, as you well know, allows you to shoot faster, to use that light more quickly that's coming through the lens. We're getting better and better with dealing with noise. So if I've got to make some sort of a compromise between having a high ISO image and maybe a little bit of noise in that image, I'd rather deal with that than trying to make that blurry image sharp, because I just don't have any luck with that. These are some of the camera settings that I think make a difference. We used to have this debate a lot 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, and I don't think it's debated as much today. I really believe RAW is a superior image to a JPEG when it comes to what you can do with that image. JPEGs, if you've got all of your settings right and you're shooting in some sort of controlled environment, work very, very well. There's some things that we do really shoot in JPEG, but if I'm out on the scene and I want to get the most dynamic range, I want to get the best image that I possibly can, so I can polish it a little bit when I get home, I am definitely going to be shooting in RAW. It used to be so much harder 5, 10, 12 years ago, taking a RAW image and looking at it in anything other than something like Lightroom or Photoshop or Bridge. You need a special application in a lot of those cases. It's amazing to me that Windows, probably all of the Apple, the iOSs too, if you're looking at something in your file browser, it does just as good of a job of previewing a RAW image as any of these other things. So the hassle of working with a RAW image, there may be some of that, but I still think the benefits, particularly for this type of photography, outweigh any of the detriments that there might be to RAW images. You might think about auto ISO. This is one of those settings that you can make in your custom setting, or you can set it up with your camera on the fly. But auto ISO will make sure that you don't get extremely underexposed images when you have to increase your shutter speed to be able to control motion within the scene, or in many cases, motion from the camera when you're shooting something with a heavy camera body, a heavy lens, and you may be, in spite of the fact that we all know that we have to use tripods in a lot of cases when you're doing this type of wildlife photography in a scene that's evolving very quickly. In a lot of cases, you're probably going to be shooting handheld instead of on top of a tripod. So an auto ISO will adjust the ISO up and down as necessary to make sure that the camera thinks it's still getting a good exposure. And cameras these days are so good about that, it's worth taking the chance and letting the camera be that extra assistant to you. Another reason for shooting in RAW is if you shoot in auto white balance, which I do in a lot of cases for things like this, because I might have wildlife going into the sunlight, into the shade. It might be cloudy as opposed to overcast or shade created by trees and things of that nature, which is a different white balance. The auto white balance really does a pretty good job these days, but the most amazing thing is you've got complete control over that if you shoot in RAW, you're doing some of your editing to really be able to fine tune that white balance. One of the things you can do with white balance is you can go a little bit to the warm side, or you can do a little bit to the cool side and use it as a creative process as opposed to specifically getting your IS or your white balance to be absolutely 100% correct. When I'm shooting wildlife, I'm always shooting shutter speed priority because I always have a pretty good idea how quickly things are going to move within the scene and how difficult it's going to be for me to be able to hold the camera body and make sure that my movement of the camera and the lens is not going to cause that particular image to be blurry. I gotta tell you, image stabilization is a miracle, whether it's in-body stabilization like it is with Sony's, or whether it is, and that's the way it is, I think, with those mirrorless cameras, with all the cameras I use, it's got to be built into the lens, and it does a great job. You got to keep in mind this important fact is that the image stabilization helps the platform that you're shooting from, that's you in a lot of cases, or maybe on a particular type of tripod, but it doesn't do anything to control the movement within the scene. So if you've got a bird moving very quickly and its wings are moving very quickly, those sorts of things, image stabilization isn't really going to help you very much. Focusing modes, I think, is one of the other really important settings when you're dealing with what you can do with a camera. These three different focusing modes, the first two would be considered the continuous auto focusing, or they got a couple of other different terms that are more auto intelligent, something like that focusing. But the AI servo, the way that works is once your camera has locked onto a subject that you are shooting, and you hold your shutter button halfway down, or you're actually pushing the shutter button all the way down, capturing a sequence of pictures, as that subject moves through the scene, whether it's away, whether it's towards you, or whether it's to the side, and the distance between the camera body and the subject changes, that AI servo or continuous autofocus will keep that subject in good, sharp, crisp focus. And you'll see a few examples here in a little bit of how cool that really is, and how it really helps you get some great series of shots, and how many I've missed when I haven't had that particular setting set that way. The autofocus points, I'll get to that in just a second, and then high-speed capture. Most camera bodies that we shoot with when we're trying to do wildlife photography and more of this creative stuff, we're going to set it on high-speed capture. We're going to be doing 10 or more frames per second. That's not quite as fast as video. We're doing probably 30 frames a second. It's not as fast as a lot of the mirrorless cameras these days, because you've got a mirror in there that's flapping up and down in a lot of the older DSLR cameras, but it still captures a lot of shots, which is We'll talk later, a real blessing and a real curse.
Do you use back button focus on the tree?
I actually took back button focus out of the presentation because I really didn't want to talk about it that much. I don't use it because I've just never gotten in the habit of using it. I've just never adapted my brain to push a button on the back of the camera for the focus and then press the shutter button. For those people who do it, they love it, and I think it's great. So probably a good thing that you brought it up. Back button focus is an option, and it works very well. My mind just has never glommed onto it.
Same question.
Yes.
Do you see in the future 4K or 8K video being able to take an image out of that? It's taking the place of still life.
Sure. I mean, I don't know when, and I don't know who's going to develop that. We do some video with some other platforms, and I know that you can take a particular frame of capture out of there, and as you go from regular 2K or whatever it would be, 4K or 8K, you're getting a bigger and bigger image that you can do more things with. Mirrorless is very close to that these days. A lot of the mirrorless cameras are able, even with continuous single frames, of getting up into the 20 frames, 21 frames a second, which is pretty amazing to me. I think my 7D Mark II does 10 or 11 frames a second, and it does it very well. But that's been adequate for me. But yes, I think that something like that is coming. I can't imagine it not. So every one of these choices that you make, I think, comes with some downside. You've got to sort of balance that risk-reward equation on whether they're giving you a better picture than what you had. Some of the times you can make that decision while you're on the scene taking pictures. In a lot of the cases, this is something that will evolve with your photography over a longer period of time. You've been doing this for 8, 10, 12, 15 years. You can see the evolution of the technology and how it works to help you get these photos, and how your craft, how your art of that particular type of photography evolves over time too. This is just to give you an idea where we talked about autofocus points. You'll see here that most cameras have some sort of a focusing scheme that works like this. It's either going to find a lot of different spots, mostly all focused in the center, a smaller pattern, a looser pattern, if you will, an even tighter pattern down here at the bottom, and then a single point where the camera is going to what? You'll recognize when you see a lot of the photographs that I've done, and probably with photographs that you've done with wildlife, where the subject probably ends up at least starting someplace near the center of the frame. So either this or this probably works well for you to focus on what it is that you're trying to take a picture of, and then with that AI servo or AI focus, let the camera do the heavy lifting after that, and continue to track that image through the scene as you're taking a series of pictures. So there's some great opportunities everywhere to be able to take nice, interesting wildlife photography, some of it with wild, or some of it with life. Sometimes it's going to be in our own backyard. Sometimes it might be a safari. I've still got at the top of my bucket list going to South Africa on the photo safari, and Alaska is on my list too, but they're someplace down the road at this point. It seems like we get farther and farther away with COVID and things of that nature. Probably a little bit closer to home and a little bit more accessible and a little bit more affordable would be photo workshops or photo tours that specialize in wildlife. I don't know who might offer those around here, but I'm sure that there's plenty of opportunity to do that. A tour, just out of clarification, probably gets you with somebody that's going to get you at the right place at the right time to be able to take a great photo. And their job is kind of the coordination, the logistics, and having the knowledge to be able to do that. Whereas a workshop is going to have that one more added component. Hopefully it's got all of those other things, but you also have somebody out there that's going to help you learn how to take some of those great pictures by giving you some hands-on experience, maybe with equipment that you otherwise don't have access to, or certainly taking advantage of their knowledge and taking photos over the years of this particular type of wildlife. Great prime destinations around this local area. We love Great Smoky Mountain National Park. The Everglades and the Okefenokee Swamp are favorites of ours. St. Augustine Alligator Farm, I can't say enough fun things about that. In February, March, April, in that time frame when you've got the nest building, when you've got the courting displays and things like that going on, and then when you've got babies that are born and feeding that goes on, stuff like that. The interesting thing is that these are not captive animals at all. They are animals that have learned this is a destination for them to go and do all of those things to procreate their species in a very, very safe environment, because if the boardwalk goes through there, and underneath that boardwalk is, guess what? A bunch of alligators. And the alligators keep out, guess what? Raccoons and other predators of things that prey upon eggs, fresh laid eggs in nests. So they learned over the course of time, this is a great place to go. The problem is, this is a problem is, if you go in there with an extra long lens, you can't get far enough away from the birds to be able to get good pictures of them, because they are so close to the boardwalk that you never want to do this, but you can almost reach out and touch them if you will. They're that close. So the nice thing is, this is a place where you can go and get great wildlife photography without necessarily having to invest in some of the super long telephoto lenses that are out there. National wildlife refuges are great, as are any other protected or hunt restricted areas, because wildlife populates that area a lot more, particularly during hunting season, where there might be hunting pressures, but you won't in those particular locations. And your objectives of what it is that you're trying to capture, if you have those types of goals and doing something specific, are certainly, they will certainly determine where you're going to go and when you're going to try to go there. What about game parks, ranches, and preserves? They're certainly a great place to go to be able to see these species. In a lot of cases, people there are very knowledgeable, so you can get a lot of great wildlife biology and habitat and behavioral information from them that will help you capture that wildlife better out in the regular free world, if you will. And there's nothing wrong with taking pictures in those areas, as long as, in my mind, you're being ethical about it. You don't say that just because I saw this kudu that I was in South Africa doing it, before wildlife parks where you can go and see these things, these species, and get great photos. And some of these places will make that available to you. Whenever you're going to an NWR or a national park or a state park and hoping to be able to do wildlife photography, it's always a great idea to check in with the park rangers. They are very, very knowledgeable about species that are there, where they're being spotted, what they're doing at that particular time of year, kind of point you in the right direction to save you a lot of legwork and going out and looking at the wrong place in a particular location. They can always make sure that you're observing all the rules and regulations for encountering or being close to that wildlife. We'll let you sort of read through this and digest it yourself. I'm not going to read it. This is a great quote out of one of my favorite bird photography books called Mastering Bird Photography. If you ever get a chance to get your hands on it and it's something that's of interest to you, it's a phenomenal read. One of the things she talks about is the persistence, but this is the thing that I'm probably a little bit weak on myself, maybe the rest of us are too, is being willing to go out there and sit in the cold, in the blind for hours and hours on end, and maybe see something, maybe not see something, maybe not catch a great photo, but being persistent enough to continue to go after it. And sometimes it's okay to get lucky and to stumble across those scenes and not have to to be out there for long periods of time, but to be there at the right time when the decisive moment occurs and be ready to push the shutter button and have your camera work with you to get a great photo. So here's where my pilot over here comes into play. We're down in 70 miles from where we're staying in Florida. It's in central Florida, in the middle of, just absolutely nowhere. And we're driving down the road and he says, there's a hawk up there. I said, well, he was sitting on the pole, so what's the big deal about that hawk? So we stopped the car, and of course I'm trying to be respectful of the wildlife, so I'm pushing myself up in my seat and I'm leaning out the passenger side window, giving our family all over the drive, quite honestly. So I'm pushing myself out the side of the window to get this photo, and I take a picture of this. And I just think that this black thing that's there is just part of the pole. I don't think either one of us saw it until a couple of seconds later, and then the hawk, switch-shouldered hawk, decides to launch, and lo and behold, in his talons, he's got lunch, and he's got lunch on the fly now. So he's got this black snake in his talons, and I'm still leaning out the window trying to take this shot. And as it says, this is like shot 2 or 3 or 4 in a series of 14 shots. And this hawk, because I didn't get out of the car and didn't scare him off from going one direction or the other, comes right over the right-hand side of the car. And I can remember the last couple of shots that I made, I'm leaning out the car like this. So wonder I didn't drop the camera, and I didn't get very good shots at that point. But it was amazing that out of this series of 14 shots, that the majority of them were well exposed and in focus for a couple of reasons. One, because we had been out looking for swallowtail kites, but we found our hawk. So the camera was set up for this type of photography and using the AI servo or continuous focusing mode. It stayed in good sharp focus all the way through those 14 shots with that exposure, with me moving in the car and him moving forward. So yeah, it's okay to be lucky, but you get lucky more often if you're prepared for what it is that you're hoping to be able to encounter. The need for speed, fractions of a second is always going to make a difference in this type of photography when you're catching movement, when you're looking for the decisive moment, like Marie Reed was talking about, a little write-up. It's great for capturing sequences of the hawk sitting on the pole, the hawk flying towards us with the snake in his talons, and we'll see some more of that here in a moment. One of the interesting things about the way that we as humans interact with our cameras is, I don't know if any of you do target shooting or anything like that, but we often have a tendency to kind of jerk the trigger on our gun. That happens with a camera too. When you press the shutter button down, it's more likely than not at that point that you're going to introduce some movement in the camera by the action of pushing that button down. Some people talk about rolling the finger over the shutter button. It's kind of like a back button focus. That's something I've already gotten used to. So I probably jam the button down pretty hard, particularly when I get excited about seeing something that maybe I've never seen before. So the first shot and the last shot in a series of pictures are often going to be your worst shots, with the other ones in the middle, maybe capturing that decisive moment and also being the sharpest and the clearest of those shots. Always going to allow you to pick out of a series of shots what the optimal images were. And in my mind, optimal is in a lot of cases, you want to have the eyes open because you want to make that connection. You want to have some catch light in the eyes because in a lot of cases, not in all cases, but many birds have very dark eyes, completely, so capturing some catch light in there makes it glow a little bit, adds a little bit of light to those images, and then again having them do something interesting, and that may show up more in shot 6 or shot 2 rather than shot 1 offsetting on the post. So here's an osprey, one of my favorite subjects to shoot. We used to live in Texas, and we used to hear about these things called osprey, and we always looked for them, and found them, and this relatives in Florida, and they said, yeah, they're like grackles around here, they're everywhere. And of course, we never got any shots that we were looking for at that point, but we really got to the point where we just love to see and photograph ospreys. And the more you love to see and photograph things, the more you learn about them, the more you understand what their habits are when they fish, when they hunt early in the morning, how the pattern evolves from them looking to them finding, which is what we see here with this osprey up in the air. You can tell based on what he's doing as he's sort of hovering there, that he's seen something that he's honing in on. And then after that, what happens is 7 seconds after he was in the sky doing that hover maneuver, he looks more like a ground rat. About 90 or 95% of the osprey being completely submerged in the water. And it's interesting that for some reason the camera still was happy with the focus, and you can see that the osprey is still a pretty good focus at that point, although you don't have any idea what's going to happen next. He's not going to stay in the water for that long a period of time, but you don't know whether he's going to come out of the water with something or not. So here is part of a very long series of shots with this osprey coming out of the water with his fish, flying towards us, and then ultimately standing on the beach when I standing out in the water. But this shot was 13 seconds later after when you saw him hovering in the air before he made the dive. 6 seconds after he entered the water, we're up to this point where he's fully immersed in the water. I can't remember if he's done his little shutter move or not. The osprey, when they come out of the water, they shake their entire body and wings to get rid of the excess water. And then he's flying by with the fish that he's caught. He's going to fly off into a tree or on a post or something like that and have breakfast. So a lot of shots there, a lot of screening need to be done. Very, very lucky, as this would say in a second. We weren't even supposed to be there. We were on a trip down to South Florida, and we had gone to the Everglades. It was 4 or 5 years ago. We had this terrible cold snowstorm, an ice storm down there. We had to cancel part of the trip. Ended up going to a place called Dunedin. They had a place called Hollywood Island, and they had a beach out there, Honeymoon Island. And we got to see and photograph lots of osprey, and that's where this particular shot came from. Using blinds can be very, very beneficial. A blind can be pretty much anything. It's a good way to get out of sight, out of mind, and reduce the pressure on animals and make them be more content to be in their natural behavior, their natural environment, when you're close enough to be able to get good photos. Some locations provide them. You can actually buy them, you can make them. We've got a blind here out in Dawson Forest that overlooks the pond out there. It's got a rookery area where you can go and be able to observe that entire scene. And again, it gets you in a place where you typically got a slit of some sort in the wall that you can hide behind, set up the camera on a tripod, and be able to get some great shots. Vehicles can make great blinds, whether it's a car, like down in Kissimmee, Florida, when we shot the hawk down there. Moving vehicles can be a problem, so you probably definitely want to be stopped. In some cases, if you're trying to take something that's a longer exposure, probably better to have the car turned off rather than having it on, because even that little bit of vibration can cause the camera to move. Although in these particular situations, because you're doing fairly high-speed photography in terms of shutter speed, car movement is not often going to be a major problem. Boats can make great floating blinds. Anything that wildlife gets used to not associating with some sort of risk. And if you're a duck and you're in duck season, a boat may not be your best blind to be in, but it can help in a lot of other cases. But again, they can often reduce the stress on the animal. So here we are in a boat on Reelfoot Lake. I think we're actually before duck season then, or maybe after, but I don't think the duck hunting was going on at a particular time of day. We were very, very lucky to find a state park ranger who was also a photographer who was willing to take us out on the lake one day and be able to go in search of a lot of different types of wildlife. We were fortunate to be there at the time when pelicans were in population there. Here's another picture of that red-shouldered hawk coming towards the car. That was taken from inside the car as they blind. Planning considerations. These seem like simple concepts, but they aren't always when you're going out. You need to go where the animals are. That seems rather intuitive. You need to go when the animals are going to be there. And it's important, again, with the habitat or the behavior of certain animals is to know when they're going to be active, when they're going to be doing things that you're interested in seeing. Some of that may be seasonal, and some of it may be time of day. As with the osprey, it's not uncommon for most wildlife to feed in the morning, feed later in the day, in the afternoon, and then hang out someplace and lie down in the field or get into a tree or roost, sleep during the day. Morning and evening, again, more activity. And in a lot of cases, nicer light. That elk we saw in Yellowstone was great morning light, despite the fact that it was a little scruffy. Knowing your subject, knowing how they behave, knowing when they perform certain daily functions in their life is going to be very important to anticipate when those key moments are going to take place. And again, going during a time of year when they're doing something interesting to the extent that you can, whether it's nesting, whether it's raising babies, whether it's helping young birds fledge, whatever it might be. And it's like YouTube. There's a plethora of locations out there where you can go and find information about wildlife, information about where they can be seen, photography websites, and it's always useful to check your weather app to find out which way the wind's going to be blowing, because in a lot of cases that will dictate which direction birds fly when they're trying to take off, just like airplanes do, what the lighting is going to be, sunrise, sunset. And if you really get into it, you find out that moon phases will affect when animals are going to be out, because a lot of animals are going to be a little bit more nocturnal. And if you got a full moon, they're probably going to be doing things at night and not have to do that early in the morning, late in the afternoon. Here we are, spring again, nesting. We're at a place down in Florida, and I think they got 30 or 35 active nests down there. And the osprey were coming and going at lightning speed. Unfortunately, they were bringing all nesting material in. It's not that interesting to see an osprey fly over and pick up some twigs and bring them back to the nest as much as it is seeing them catch a fish in the Gulf of Mexico. Got a couple of stellar jays here in Yosemite National Park. They're doing their courting thing. It's interesting that I cheated a little bit here, and I used a little pop of fill flash to brighten them up a little bit, fill in the shadows and make them stand out a little bit more. Compositional tips. You've heard all this before. Good placement in the frame, giving it a little bit of breathing room. Part of this is going to be determined on what your goals are when you go out there, whether you want frame filling shots, whether you want big landscape shots that have wildlife in them doing things. So whether it's tight frame filling or environmental type of thing, to the extent that you can, and you're not going to be able to convince animals to go where they're not going to be interested in going. So you're going to have to put up with the scene that they're in. You may be able to influence that a little bit between whether you do morning shots or evening shots, where the light's going to be coming from, what the background may be. And in most cases with long lens photography, your depth of field is going to be fairly shallow, which means that if you have things behind the wildlife that you're photographing, in a lot of cases that's going to be a little bit softer and not quite as distracting as it would be if you were doing landscape photography, where you typically want everything from foreground to background to be nice and sharp and in focus. Color, detail, different things that will help stand out. So this is way too tight. We've got a great egret that's almost out of the frame, which is actually a useless shot. Here we've got the white pelicans on Reelfoot Lake that's doing more of a flight into the scene as opposed to out of the scene. In a pretty good location, and whether it's halfway, whether it's before halfway, that's your own personal judgment what you decide. But you wouldn't want it all the way over here on this side of the scene with the takeoff trail being behind him. So here we have a bit of a frame filling shot with a alligator. You know, alligators are so prevalent down in many of the swamps that you get to. And you look at this and say, well, you must have been awful close. We probably were relatively close, with 10 feet, 15 feet, with long lists, things like that. So you can figure out whether this gator needs to go to the dentist or not. Looks like it's got a little bit of stain there on that one tooth. This is an entirely different picture of the gator. It's actually one of my favorite ones because of the way that the light makes it stand out from the background, and or a little bit more of an environmental wildlife shot as opposed to the frame filling shot. So we've got separation between the birds, which is something that I always try to achieve if I'm shooting two or more, to have them not flying in front of or over top of each other. You don't always have that choice. Here we've got sort of a nice complementary background behind a inbreeding plumage cattle egret. This was shot down at the alligator farm. Here we got not so great of a shot. We're in Maine, we're out with a guide, we're trying to shoot moose, and lo and behold, I'm hanging out the passenger side window again, trying to get this shot. I'm not smart enough to figure out that I'm focused on this bush and not on the moose. If I had an infinite depth of field, this wouldn't be a problem, but with a very limited depth of field, the moose is clearly out of focus. So this, probably other than having this discussion, is a pretty useful shot too. Here we got some black skimmers again with some nice separation between them. Here we got loons, and I just love shooting loons, but I hate this shot because I've got one that's partially in front of the other one in the background. I'm going to try to move along fairly quickly. Here's a lot of the do's, the things that you're trying to look for in your photography, whether it's technical detail or whether it's compositional detail, or the way that you take the shot. And again, down here at the bottom, we've got some judicious use of fill light when it works. Interestingly enough, animals do not seem to react to flash at all. I don't know why that is, but they don't. And then a little bit of slow movement in fast-moving wings is okay as long as the eyes are sharp, and the other things that are important to the photograph are good and sharp. So here we've got a cedar waxwing getting ready to consume a berry with a little bit of catchlight inside. Here we got a purple gallinoo down in the Everglades. We looked for these for years and years. Finally got down there when we went out one morning early, and there were purple gallinoo absolutely everywhere. And it was fun to learn a little bit more about purple gallinoo and realize that these gigantic feet that they have allow them to actually walk across the lily pads that are down there and do their hunting, fishing, things of that nature without pushing down through the lily pads. So part of nature and how birds, different wildlife evolve to be able to be in the environment. One of my favorite shots that was growing out of there in Florida, talk about making eye contact. I guess I'm sure we got that there. Those beautiful coyotes out there we're seeing out of Point Reyes National Wildlife Area, or seashore area in California, where this coyote was sort of loafing along and stopped, stopped, ultimately he just continued on his way. Try to go through these fairly quickly. Red-headed duck, you got a little bit of wing movement. It may bother some people, it doesn't bother me. Again, it's technically what is this that you're trying to show, and how much or little detail are you trying to get, as long as the body, to me, is in good sharp focus. Happy with that. A little bit of movement in the wings just helps create that dynamic look of the bird in flight. These are things that I consider to be don'ts. Buck shots, okay, so the moose now decides to move, and now he's in focus. But not the most elegant look of one of my first attempts, and it's an embarrassing shot because it's such a fun thing to come across, and didn't know enough about what I was doing at the time. Fortunately, I'll say that was a long, long, long time ago. We got a bald eagle chasing a coot, and I can't remember if I was in or if I'd actually gotten out of the car at that point. Down in the car.
Trying to get out of.
Nothing I had done to the camera had prepared it for what I was going to see here, and I completely missed that shot. And for any of you who are concerned, I will tell you that the coot did not get caught. Coot got away. Don't encroach on wildlife. Stay out of areas that you're supposed to stay out of. Obey the signs and rules for the area that you're going to be in. The devil do not, and these places get marked pretty well. Make sure that you don't encroach upon any areas where there's any nesting going on, particularly when those nests have the eggs or the hatchlings in them. If you put pressure on the animals, mostly birds in this case, that are sitting on the nest, they can sometimes abandon those nests and the babies will not come to full term. So very, very important thing. I'm going to blow through these because I want to try to be done close to 8:30. So you can read the details. I'll go through and look at some of the pictures that I've got. There's another one of the great egrets. It's not the same one, but it's a great egret down in Florida someplace. It's doing its courting and mating display. Barrow's golden eye in Oregon, and the thing that surprises me, I guess, is how varied some of these behaviors are, where a male is trying to attract the attention of a female, and I think it usually goes that way. At least it does in our world, I think. But some of the things that they do are just absolutely hilarious. I can't even imagine what type of title we might give this particular shot. We got maybe a spat here, or we might have sporting going on between these two terms. I'm not sure what type of term they are. Interesting about moose that we learned the hard way is they really don't like cold water, which is one of the things that kept us from seeing more moose when we were in Maine on this particular trip. And the nutrients that are in the vegetation at the bottom of the water are the best for keeping them healthy, but in particular allowing them to grow their antlers, which I don't know if I can quote the numbers, so I'm not going to try, but something like 1 to 3 inches a day is how quickly their antlers evolve when they're in the spring, and they need type of nutrients that you get on the bottom of the water. So they wait out there and they reach down in and they get a hold of this stuff, and they'll come up and they'll chew a big mouthful and swallow it and go back down again. We got some really interesting, these are not the same cedar waxwing, but the same group that were behind our house in Austin, Texas, when we used to live there. But I can't tell whether this is mom looking on or the young one is throwing the berry up in the air, but I thought that was kind of an interesting look. Here you got a double-crested cormorant. I know the fish did not survive that encounter. And yes, it did. We watched it through the whole term of going all the way down its throat into its stomach. Took a few minutes, but here we got some more feeding again. Here we got some nest building activities, some joint nest building between two crested caracara, probably near that same area in Florida where we got hawk shot. Matter of fact, it wasn't the same, it was on the same road. So a little hunting activity. You never know who was going to get the better end of this deal, but I'm pretty sure it was the great blue heron. This was an interesting thing that we learned when we were down in Florida, is that and I don't know if other egrets do it or not, the reddish egret in particular bring their wings up over their head and create a shadow on the surface of the water, and then they can see through the water and find their prey better this way than they would be able to, because they don't have polarized vision, I don't think. So they wouldn't be able to see through the reflection on top of the water. This is one of the ways that they've evolved and learned how to hunt. I'll tell you this one real quickly, then we're going to try to get to the end. We're down in Florida. We're out there on the Honeymoon Island beach, And Mimi sees this and I don't. There was an osprey that's coming back with some sort of a redfish from hunting, and it's looking like it's going back to have its nice breakfast. And the immature bald eagle came out, did its twist in the air, grabbed a hold of the fish out of the talons of the osprey, and turned around and went off with it. I think the osprey for a second or two thought about going after the eagle to try to get back. And I think we thought that's probably a lot easier and safer for me to go find another. So I got the shot after the shot, and it's still fun to be able to remember that. I missed the shot that was there, so that decisive moment was one I wasn't looking for. Feeding. We got our green parrots down in Florida. So people, there was a park on the Gulf Coast that had one or two of these every now and then, and there was people that we encountered down there said they've been going there for 7 years trying to find these. This was that exceptionally cold year that we had, and there must have been a flock of 100, 150 green parrots down there, and they just filled these trees. And this is one of the things that many of them were doing, being close to each other, to try to, as we as humans do in some cases, share a little bit of body. And again, we were lucky enough because of the position of the sun. Not that I did anything for that, but we did get a little catch light in the eye. Important functions that we all have to deal with is adversities in life. We've seen this sandhill crane a couple of times that we were down there, and how it got around, I will never know. And when it lost half of its leg, how, I will never know. But it got around and it just functioned, as far as I can tell, as well as any of the other two-legged sandhill cranes that were down there. Not the same group, same town that we were in. Here we think we've got some sort of, this isn't fighting necessarily, this is some sort of training and things that are going on between, well, I think are the two parents of a young sandhill crane over here on the left-hand side. I'm going to go through these. These are just tips that help make your pictures a little bit more interesting and maybe a little bit less static. Pairs probably better than singles. Anything that creates some dynamic movement in the scene for the eye to follow. You have one bird in there, you're going to look at it directly. You got a couple of birds in there, your eye's going to move around, which is typically the way that we like to compose our photos to start with. So is it one, is it two, or maybe is it thousands of snow geese? This is up around Reelfoot Lake as well. Ain't nothing wrong, it's cute, love little chipmunks. A face only a mother could love. Don't ask me what this is. I was trying to think of this the other day, and I think this is probably a buzzard that was maybe feasting on something in the water and stayed in the wrong area for too long. And the alligator decided that he was going to make a meal out of something that was making a meal out of something else. I just love my little harbor seal pups out in California. Another picture of the hawk. I'm going to go through these quickly. Big versus small, odd looks. We got an eastern amber wing dragonfly that's probably wingspans about 3/4 of an inch or so wide, sitting on the eyelid of a gator. Quirky behavior. Again, this is part of the fun stuff that we've been able to learn while we've been out doing these sorts of things, is that alligators have no natural cooling mechanism through their skin because it is so thick. So when they get hot, they open their mouth and they sort of roar, and they bring in cooler air from the outside into their inside, because that's the only way that they can cool themselves down. Precarious predicaments that certain things get themselves in. This was included on the invitation for the presentation tonight. It was interesting for us to learn that moose are so front heavy that they cannot bend over and put their head down without bending their legs, so they actually have to get down on their front legs bendo so they can get close enough to the ground. In this particular case, this is one of the mineral pits or salt pits that they're going to be getting their mineral pits for the day. So you normally know what a green heron looks like, and they can look very different depending on what it is that they're doing. And all this is his neck is stretched out rather than pulled in, which is their natural one. I'm going to go through these, and then I'm going to try to wrap up. Am I doing okay, Mike?
We're doing good.
So we got peekaboo here. I always like to think that if you put some sort of a caption on it, give it a title, help to tell a little bit of the story about why you thought the particular picture was a little bit unique. And I'm absolutely positively convinced that this moose was looking at us through the crack in that tree, and he really didn't think that we could see him because he just stood there. Oh, by the way, this is the moose that went all the way across that little stream that was feeding and came out on the other side, got to this point, and then put his head behind that tree and stared at us for. I think we actually got tired of shooting and left at that point. Maybe could tell you the story about the black white frogs. Last topic, then I'm going to close for questions if we've got time. When you're shooting high frame rate captures, 10 frames a second, and you go out and spend the day shooting wildlife in a very profitable area, sometimes you're going to come back with 100 shots, sometimes you're going to come back with 600 to 1,000 shots. And that sounds like a daunting task to figure out how to get through. If you're a landscape photographer, you go out and get 10 shots, and you think, man, I really nailed this, and I need to go home and take a look at these. If you got 600 or 800 shots, and every one of them are similar, but maybe a little bit different, you really have to be not scientific, but you've got to be deliberate about how you go in and do your screening. You've got to be very, very brutal and keep only the very best. And in a lot of cases, it sometimes needs to be a sequential sort of thing where you go in and say, these are either the best and I'm getting rid of everything else, or these are the worst and I'm getting rid of those. And then I'm going to start some sort of a ranking process to ranking from 1 through 5, and then get rid of 5s and get rid of 4s until you've got only your ones, if your ones are your keepers, or the other way around. So in a lot of cases, it says down there towards the bottom, you can't do that all in one bite. So like eating an elephant, you got to do it over time. Some of these shoots that we've come back from, particularly some of the longer trips where we had a particularly good session with wildlife, it will take me embarrassingly a month or 2 months to go through all of the photos that were shot to be able to get it down to the point where I said, these are the ones that I really like. And in a lot of cases, if you're really lucky, and we often get lucky, I have to admit, we still have a lot more than we can ever do anything with, but it's still a fun process. And as you can tell, hopefully by my enthusiasm about this, that we just love getting out there and interacting with wildlife, taking pictures, trying to share some of those pictures, and then learning a little bit more about that wildlife at the same time. So my final tip is this: practice, practice, practice. Go out and at some point just do it. Few minutes, 10 minutes over, I guess, maybe. Apologize for that.
Questions in the room, and maybe one for people online. So anybody have a question in the room first? Don't be shy.
You did a really good job. Or really bad.
All right. Anybody online have a question? And don't send it to me in chat. Actually speak up, because I can't really see the chat.
If not, I appreciate your attention this evening. It was great being able to see the group live again and in person. Hope maybe to be able to do this again someday. Thank you very much for allowing us to come in here and talk about this. If you have any questions after the fact, I very willingly answer by email, and you got my email address hopefully on the card, or you feed those through Mike and he can feed them to me.
Yes, send them to me and you can get them.
Absolutely. And one last thing that we would do, if you're interested, and let Mike know this either tonight or later, I can send you a copy of all of these slides in a PDF format. If you want to go back and look at the notes, and get rid of all the pictures and just have the text, that would be a way that you want to look at it. Thank you again very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. We appreciate it and glad to have you back and
Appreciate it.
look forward to having you back again. All right.
Does anybody in the room have a ballot to vote for the photo challenge? We're gonna have to share a pen. I didn't bring these, like, yeah.
All right. That is fine. I don't have a mouse, by the way. We got this.
I want to know, everything was great, but I want to know how he did that.
Let's see.
Somewhere in the house, there's a weird twitchy.
All right. Let's see.
Twitchy side.
Let's see. All right. Oh, that was a little bit smoother.
Am I using your mouse?
Yeah, you can use my mouse and you can use the pointer if you want. The down one is the one that changes the screen. That down one will advance it. The up one and the up one will go backwards.
Okay,
Whichever works easiest. Is that my ballot?
yes,
Okay.
yep.
All right. Presenting
So-
Lisa.
So we're gonna have our monthly photo challenge. For everybody in the room or online that's new.
Can people at home see?
Oh, they can't see
We're
that.
not seeing the slideshow yet.
Okay, hang on. I thought I hit share. Maybe I didn't. Yeah, guess which picture you wanted to vote without being able to see it. All right. All right, share screen. There we go. Start from beginning. All right, and is that better? You should be seeing it.
There we are. We're
That
good.
works.
They can see it.
Okay. This is
Okay.
only our second time. Give me till like December and I'll figure it out.
So to start again, everybody in the room has a ballot and they'll be voting with your ballot in the room. For everybody on the Zoom meeting, you can vote with our standard email address, which I'll go through a couple times here. Our photo challenge theme for this month is tells a story. So when we go through the photos, keep that in mind and think about what story the photographer was trying to portray or express in their photograph tonight. And I'm not having any success. There we go. The rules for our photo challenge are that you must be a paid member. You can submit one photo per month. And that photo must be no older than 2 years from the challenge date. We award points for 1st through 5th place each month. And at the end of the year, we total those points for photographer of the year, and that person wins a free membership for the following year, $100 and a special trophy. So when you're voting tonight, please vote for your 1st, 2nd, and 3rd choice. Be sure you don't vote for the same picture twice. That happens every now and then. And if you're voting from the Zoom meeting, you can email your votes tonight to vote@ngaphoto.club. And again, I'll say that at the end of the challenge one more time for you, because that email address is a little bit different. And we'll get started. We have 10 photos tonight. If you're new, I will go through those 3 times. We'll go forward, we'll go backward, and then I'll go through them one more time so you have plenty of opportunity to see each photo. And here's number 1. Two. 3. 4. 5. 6. 7. 8. 9. 10. See if I can make this go backwards. 9. 8. 7. 6. 5. 4. 3. 2. 1. Last time, a little quicker. 2. 3. 4. 5. 6. 7. 8. 9. 10. Again, if you're in the Zoom meeting, please send your choices for 1st, 2nd, and 3rd place to vote@ngaphoto.club. And you have plenty of time to get them in. I won't count votes until I get home tonight, so.
All right, and
All
don't
right.
go yet. I have if I can get it to work right, I have like 2 more slides left. I have to get back to mine. Let's see.
Love that close-up.
Oh, was that Rick?
No, but he thanks you.
I was thinking the same thing though.
No, Rick
Thanks.
liked it the other night when we were practicing. Yeah.
I got the extended version of that highlight.
All right. All right, is it showing the slideshow?
Now it is.
There you go.
All right, so our next meeting is going to be on Friday, June 17th at 7 p.m. here at the Bowen and on Zoom. Our presentation is going to be by David Akubian. He is going to be discussing the landscape image. And we talked about this earlier. We're making a change in the schedule of our photo themes. So if you have an old schedule, we are not going to be doing composites next month. We're going to do perspective. We're going to move composites to later in the year because we want to try to do a workshop. So don't send a composite next month. The theme is perspective. And that is it. Overall, I think the technology went a little bit better than last time. Still have some things to work out, but give us time. It took me 2 years on Zoom and I still don't have it right. We're doing it at home. But thank you, everybody who was here, everybody online. Make sure you get your votes in and we will see you next month.
One last thing.
Wait a minute.
I need 10 chairs left out. The rest of them go.
All right, that was for inside. All right, we'll see everybody next month.
Okay, everybody.